Hello and welcome to today's episode of Platinum Talks Wealth. Emmy Nominated journalist Jennifer Rogers Markwell changed gears in her television career when she realized the need to help women make sense of investing. She regularly hosts educational workshops to empower women and others to take charge of their financial future. Now, join your host, Platinum Wealth Management President Jennifer Rogers Markwell, as she leads us into the world of money memories, money infidelities, and how these can mold our relationship with our personal finances as adults. Let's dive into today's episode.
Hi, it's Jennifer Rogers Markwell, and you're joining us on the Platinum Talks Wealth podcast. Today, we're joined by Carol Ann Cooper, who has quite a story to tell.
It's like, where does one start with one story? I think really part of it is actually Carol was the name that I grew up with. And then once I changed and started on a journey, personal development, and found myself, I then used my middle name. So I'm called Carol Ann now, which has got a completely different resonance to it.
Well, tell me more about that path. I mean, we were talking briefly and you were saying you were a math teacher, you kind of evolved into this whole different place and whole different persona where you're doing something entirely different.
Maths is a subject I love. I find easy. I always enjoyed it. And it was something my dad always helped me with as well. But I picked it up and I just ran with it. And I became a maths teacher. And I loved teaching. I loved that, helping students to just find that spark of, oh, is that what it is? Or is that all it is? And go through those hurdles of not being able to understand. And I never ever thought I would leave teaching. But as I said, life has other ways of showing you that that's not always the path. You know, what you think you're going to do isn't always where you're going to end up. And so it was through my own daughter's struggle with accessing learning that I found something called educational kinesiology, brain gym, which is about re-educating the body to move in a more efficient way. It's drawing out learning through movement. And I just accidentally had a conversation with somebody. I'd gone to this natural therapist clinic to get something for this Christmas time. And I'd known about the brain gym course, which to me was 4 days, which I thought I just couldn't afford. But I happened to see some leaflets and I went, oh, can you have private consultation, with brain gym? And literally in that moment, the receptionist said, oh, yes, and here's David Hubbard right now. And I had literally a 1-minute conversation with him about what I was observing with my daughter. And he said, I can help. I went, great, make me an appointment. And he'd literally only come out to get something for a client in that moment. So the universe has an amazing way of putting things in your path to guide you. And my daughter let me sit in on all of the sessions. This was from the January to the May. She was about to sit her exams. She was age 15, 16, angry, rebellious, didn't want to sit any of her exams because she didn't think she was going to pass them all. And not my daughter that I knew, And in that 5-month period, she changed. She got her confidence back. She sat all her exams. She passed them all. And then a year later, I was on the phone to her because she went on to do another course and was getting merits and distinctions in her work. And say a year later, she said to me, oh, I wish I could do my GCSEs again because I know I could do better. I was just like, wow. So sitting in on all the sessions with her, watching the changes that I observed, I was in tears most of the time just to see those shifts, with her. And I just had to know more. And so I ended up managing to get some training did the training in Brain Gym, and my whole life just changed, because I came back into school with these tools to support my students, but met this huge mountain of resistance, because I mean, this was 20 odd years ago. And so it's like, and I was head of department as well. So I'm coming in attempting to talk about something else. The school's struggling as it is. And here am I talking and trying to bring something in that I couldn't actually explain. So as I say, I met this enormous mountain of resistance. But the students that did access and did I use Brain Gym with, the changes were absolutely incredible. Their ability to focus, to understand what they were doing was incredible. Taught for 19 years.
And so in personal development, I mean, obviously, as you're helping others, did you find that you were just evolving to such a unique place yourself?
Yeah. I was finding myself, and really what I was focusing on then was helping people move through stuckness. But my struggle, again, was still being able to explain it, because for me, words were always a nightmare. I hated writing, and I could never explain what I felt or what I saw. So I really struggled in putting words together or being able to explain what I had on offer. So I only had odd sort of clients over the years, but realized that actually I needed to work on myself. But what was interesting was I found myself helping people with their writing. Just, somebody came and asked me if I could help them. And I went, yeah, and they wanted to do some writing. So that just, I say, it just happened. But for me, one of the key things was that I did an English language A-level, which in this country is an advanced level that you normally do age 17, 18. And I thought I was not capable of doing it. So it was never something in my realm at school to do. I did A-level maths. That was me. Did A-level maths, trained as an infant teacher, ended up as a secondary school teacher, but got my degree in maths. So again, a lot of twists and turns, but something, it's about 17 years ago now. I just suddenly went, I think I'll have a go at an English language A-level. And so I did. In my journeys, when I was on a boat on San Francisco Bay, and I was just looking up at the mountainside, and there's this beautiful mansion at the top. And I went to myself, that's going to be mine one day. And there's this voice inside said, oh yeah, and how are you going to afford that? 3 or 4 million. Well, that was then. I don't know what it'd be now. And immediately this voice went, you're going to write a book. And I was like, what? Me? Write a book? No. I can't do that. I'm not good enough to write. I hate writing. How am I going to write a book? What am I going to write about? And that's when I started to get curious and thought, okay, so if I'm going to write a book, what's it going to be about? What could I write about? How could I? And I think that started to inform where I was going, and it became an unconscious driver in some way. And so now I actually find myself, I feel I've unlocked that writer within me. I'm enjoying words more, exploring words, because it's like earlier you used a word to me, and the words that very often will just sit on a page. They're dead, there's no meaning to them, there's no life to them. Whereas numbers, there's life. They move around, they speak, they cooperate. But I've now got to that point where I can ask and say that word I don't know what it means. And I will go through the dictionary, ask for a meaning, look up synonyms, look up antonyms, similar words and words that are opposite, and get a feel for that word so that I really understand it and it comes alive. And I'm enjoying that journey now. And it's very pertinent for this time and what I'm about. And it's actually called Lead with Your Story. And for me, it's about people leading with their story writing their story. And that's where I've gone into niching and helping people with their story, because that is the one piece of writing that really will help their business, but they hold back on because it's too painful. They find that their fear going into meltdown, it makes them too vulnerable. Whereas with all the training and the work that I've done on myself, I can actually hold that space so that they can feel that emotion, but be with the emotion and write from that place rather than go into meltdown. And that's a much more powerful place to write from, because then they actually connect with their reader, or their reader can connect with them because they feel that emotion. I think there's a lot of books, it's just written across the surface. You don't really feel the emotion that people are writing about. And if you can write from there, it's much more powerful.
We were saying earlier how everybody has a unique story, right? And that's why I'm doing what I do. I feel like a lot of what you're sharing, I feel as well, right? So my background, I spent 18 years in television. I anchored and reported news. I'm Emmy nominated. My grandparents were my mom and dad. And when my grandpa passed, my grandma found herself, in an interesting place because he was always the money guy. And so she had no concept of what to do at that point. And we found ourselves, talking to others and never had that warm, fuzzy, fun, feeling that anyone was doing what was in her best interest. And she's like, if we're going through this, imagine how many other women are going through this. And I said, I'll learn everything I can. And, here I am, 13, 14 years later in the finance world, running Platinum Wealth Management. So for me, I never would have been able to put down on paper where my life would have taken me and the twists and turns. And similar to what you were saying, going from, living and loving math, right, to now encouraging others to share their truth and put it down on paper. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And it's challenging as well. And because last year I got to a point where I was really questioning, is this really what I'm meant to be doing? Because I'd had a few sessions with my grandchildren and helping them with their maths. And I was like, oh, I love this, and then I'm going, well, why am I doing writing? Why am I putting myself through this? And just really kept putting up those prayers and got the answer that actually I will know once I've got there. There's a breakthrough for me to have, that once I've got through that, there's something that's going to happen that's beyond my wildest comprehension, actually. And so I have to trust the process and just keep going. And that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I love that. I again, that's why we're here too, right? Like I'm kind of trusting the process of podcasting and having these conversations. And one that comes up quite frequently is the thought of money memories. I hear it over and over, and I feel like that is definitely something others can learn from. And everyone has their own personal story, much like what you're sharing for money memories. I mean, it could be, I grew up and my family had a hard time getting food on the table, and that's how I resonate with money now as an adult. It could be you've never had those struggles, so you've never, had any relationship with money because it's always been just a tool to you. What are some of your money memories that you have that you're open to sharing?
The one that always straight away pops into my mind is because my mum and dad, they struggled with money. Money was tight, but they always found a way to let us go, find a way for us to pay for us to go on school trips, because they actually went without themselves in some way. And I'm always sort of grateful for that. And I think as a child, you don't recognize that that's what they're doing. It wasn't until I was older that I really appreciated that. But there was always this borrowing from Peter to pay Paul going on. Dad was very hot with keeping his accounts and very canny with, keeping track of his money. And it was like, you borrow from here to pay there. So there's something about borrowing from Peter to pay Paul all the time. And I certainly had an aspect of sensing that that's what I was always doing. And I've done a few processes around stop that, that isn't really what I want to do. I want to be able to just pay for it without having to borrow from here to have to then pay back again, you know. But one of the other things that I've really been, let's say, battling with and have had a real challenge with is the mindset in terms of a job is the only way to get money. And so, because that's how I was brought up, you get a job because that's how you get money. I went to college because obviously my parents, their schooling got interrupted because of the war and other things. So for them, a good education was really important. But then it was always to go and get a job. There was no other avenue open or thoughts about it. So when I actually decided to leave teaching to set up my own business, it took me a long while to realize it's a completely different mindset. And even though I knew that I'd got to a point with teaching where I could feel the constraints, it was like I felt that there's a ceiling, that each month that's all you're going to get. And it doesn't matter how much work you do, you're not going to earn any more money than that each month. And that really used to start hitting home to me. But when I set out to set up my own business and stepped out of teaching, there was this, well, if I put more energy into that, I can earn more money. But somehow it wasn't tangible. It wasn't something that was in my, what's the word? I guess in my background or within me to fully understand. And I've always been feeling this, well, why don't you just go and get a job? Why don't you just go back to teaching? You know, when I really struggled for money, people would say, well, go back to teaching. I'm going, no, that's not what I want to do. I've trained in all these modalities. I could be earning way more than that. Why am I not doing it? And so, but again, there was always that in me. I'd look at a job in somewhere else and think, I could go for that. And I catch myself and think, hang on a minute, that's only what, 10, 20 pound an hour. You can be earning 60 pound an hour for what you do. Why does that suddenly seem more appealing? And so I've done a lot of work on myself in terms of clearing that pull, that mindset of a job is the only way to get an income. And it started to fade, and I started to realize that actually being your own, having my own business is a way of getting an income. But recently it was there in my face again. As I was talking with my grandchildren, the older ones the oldest one who's got a job, the other one is at college, but both of them set up a business during lockdown, and they're doing really well with it. But then they started talking about getting a job, and it was a conversation that kept being talked about getting a job because they wanted more money or some other money. And I'd be thinking, but you've got your businesses. If you put the time and energy into that, you could be bringing money in. It just seemed crazy. Why am I hearing this conversation again about job, get a job, get a job? And so again, I went in and started again clearing. There's still something in me that's still got that pull. So again, cleared that and was able to have other conversations with my two granddaughters, and they're starting to now focus more on their business and taking that off again, and realizing that actually a job is only one way. That's just a small part of there is other ways. There's a bigger picture out there, and I'm going, yes, thank you. So really that has colored for me my journey in terms of getting my business going and being able to earn money through what I do.
That's
obviously there's a lot of other limiting beliefs, but certainly around money.
You're so right, because that's a conversation I feel like a lot of people have. The entrepreneurial entrepreneurial spirit, right, can be very challenging and very scary all in one, because it's all you, right? How are you going to navigate that? What does that look like? Would you rather lean into a safety net of a normal, 8 to 5 type of job? Like that's a big conversation that I feel like is definitely timely right now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Especially, where people have lost jobs and, or their jobs have changed, or even their business that they had. It is, it just because maybe they lost it or their own business sort of went down, there is ways of coming back up again. And I think actually looking at businesses and being an entrepreneur and setting up your own business is an avenue to really think about and stop thinking about, it's got to be a job. It's got to be a job. That's the only way to get money in.
Yeah. No, I think that's invaluable to share. Those of you listening and spending some time with us, either on YouTube or on the podcast, just listening to us, please join us again for our next episode of Platinum Talks Wealth.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, Platinum Talks Wealth, please subscribe and share. For more information about Jennifer Rogers Markwell or Platinum Wealth Management, please visit www.platinumwealth.net. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member of FINRA and SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. The guest speakers and their companies are not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or Platinum Wealth Management.